All right, this is section 8-4, angles of elevation and depression. All right, so let's start off with a review. Underline the correct word or number to complete each sentence. So the measure of a right angle is greater than the measure of an acute angle and less than the measure of an obtuse angle. So a right angle has a measure of 90 degrees. Lines that intersect to form four right angles are perpendicular lines. To circle the right angle in the bottom. So the right angles would be angles CBA and angles DBA. All right, elevation. So the related word is depression. Elevation of an object is its height above a given level, such as eye level or sea level. Angles of elevation and depression are acute angles of right triangles formed by a horizontal distance and a vertical height. All right, so John elevated his feet on a footstool. The elevation of Mount McKinley is 20,320 feet. You elevate an object by raising it to a higher position. Okay, so let's identify angles of elevation and depression. What is the description of angle 2 as it relates to the situation below? So let's write true or false. Angle 2 is above the horizontal line, so that is true. Angle 2 is an angle of elevation from the person in the hot air balloon to the bird. That's true. Angle 2 is an angle of depression from the person in the hot air to the bird. That's false. Angle 2 is an angle of elevation from the top of the mountain to the person in the hot air balloon. That is false. So angle 2 would be described as, angle 2 is the angle of elevation from the person in the hot air balloon to the bird. Okay, so let's use the angle of elevation in the problem. So you sight a rock climber on a cliff at a 32 angle of elevation. Your eye level is 6 feet above the ground and you are at 1,000 feet from the base of the cliff. What is the approximate height? So what do we know? We know that the angle of elevation is 32 degrees. We know that the distance to the cliff is 1,000 feet, and we know that the eye level is 6 feet above the ground. So we need the height of the ground. So we first find the length of the leg opposite to 32 degrees by using the tangent of 32 degrees, and then we're going to add 6 to the end. Okay, so explain why we use tangent and not sine or cosine. Okay, so because the ratio that uses the unknown height and the given of 1,000 feet is the tangent ratio. Okay, so we would set up the equation like this. The tangent of 32 degrees equals d over 1,000. So we're going to write the equation. Multiply both sides by 1,000 and solve for d. Using your calculator, we get d equals 624.8693519. And then the distance from the eye level to the climber is 625 feet. But remember, we're 6 feet above the ground, so we have to add that, so we get 631. All right, let's use the angle depression problem. So an airplane pilot sights a life raft of 26 degrees of angle of depression. The airplane's altitude is 3 kilometers. What is the airplane's horizontal distance d from the raft? So step 1, let's label the diagram. So we know that the angle of depression is 26 degrees. The altitude is 3 kilometers. And the angle of elevation, the horizontal distance d. So we also know these two angles here are actually congruent. So the angle of elevation is also 26 degrees. All right, so the equation I would use is, notice I'm giving opposite and adjacent. I would use the tangent of 26 degrees equals 3 over d. So let's solve that equation. the tangent 26 degrees equals 3 over d. I would first multiply by d and divide by the tangent. So we get d equals 3 over the tangent of 26 degrees. Using your calculator, d equals 6.1509111525. Rounding to the nearest tenth, I get that this raft is 6.2 kilometers away. All right, vocabulary. We're going to line the correct word. The angle of elevation is formed above a horizontal line. Depression is below. To measure the angle of elevation is equal to the angle of depression. So what happened in this situation? A homework question says that the angle of depression from the bottom of a house window to the ball on the ground is 20 degrees. At the right, what is your friend's sketch of this? Is this right? So is the angle that your friend identified as the angle of depression formed from the horizontal line of sight? No. Okay, is it correct angle of depression adjacent to or opposite the angle identified by your friend? Well, it's the adjacent one to it. Okay, so your friend should have labeled this to be 20 degrees, and that would be the error. And that is the end of this section.